Welcome, night dwellers, to another episode of Simple Dark Stories. I'm your host, Mothy. In tonight's story, Scales of Fate, young Sloane joins his father, uncle, and cousin for a quiet riverside retreat. But as strange transformations take hold and nightmares begin to stir, they'll soon find that the river is not as serene as it seems. What lurks beneath the surface may change Sloane forever and drag his family into the unknown. Will Sloane survive the secrets waiting in the water, or will they claim him? As dusk deepened into night, the sky transformed into a tapestry of inky blues and purples, pierced by the first glimmers of starlight. The forest encircling the cabin seemed to breathe, each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs hinting at a life force beyond comprehension. The air was cool and damp, carrying the rich scent of pine mingled with the faint, briny aroma of a distant sea, a paradox in this landlocked woodland. Sloane stood alone on the porch, his fingers absently scratching at the bandage on his forearm. The gauze was unraveling, stained with spots of a strange iridescent fluid. Beneath it, his skin itched fiercely, as though invaded by an army of invisible insects. He dug his nails into the dressing, desperate to quell the maddening sensation. "Quit messing with it," his father Josue scolded, slapping Sloane's hand away. The sharp smack echoed in the quiet evening, the sting lingering on his skin. "You'll make it worse. We'll change the dressing before bed." Sloane mumbled an apology, but his eyes betrayed his unease. The throbbing beneath the bandage had grown more intense, a steady pulse that seemed to synchronize with the rhythmic rustling of the trees. His cousin, Amon, leaned against the porch railing, glaring at Sloane with thinly veiled contempt. "This is exactly why I didn't want you here," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Always causing drama. Did you bite yourself this time for attention?" "I wasn't lying," Sloane said softly, his gaze dropping to the worn wooden boards beneath his feet. "That fish, it had teeth. It bit me." "Sure it did," Amon said, rolling his eyes. He pulled out his cell phone, scowling at the screen. "No signal. Great. This weekend is officially dead." Josue stepped between them, the scent of beer and sweat clinging to his clothes. "Enough, both of you," he said, his tone broking no argument. "Go gather wood for the bonfire." Uncle Scott stumbled out of the cabin, his face flushed. He clapped a heavy hand on Josue's shoulder, nearly causing him to spill his drink. "Lighten up, brother. This is our boy's only weekend." His breath reeked of alcohol, with words slurring. "Let's go catch us some river bass while the kids go collect sticks." Josue sighed, casting a wary glance at the boys. "Fine, but I expect that firewood stacked neatly when we get back." With that, he followed his brother into the forest, their laughter fading among the trees. Amon collapsed onto the porch steps, exhaling dramatically. "Guess I'll sit here and enjoy the nature," he said sarcastically, flicking a pine needle off his shoe. Sloane hesitated. I'll go get the firewood," he offered. "Knock yourself out," Amon replied without looking up. Venturing into the forest, Sloane felt an immediate change. The canopy overhead thickened, blotting out any remaining moonlight. The temperature dropped noticeably, the air heavy with moisture. Each breath filled his lungs with the earthy scent of damp soil and decaying foliage. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Shadows stretched and twisted, playing tricks on his eyes. The soft carpet of moss underfoot squished unpleasantly, and the occasional drip of condensation from the leaves above landed on his neck like cold fingers. An uncomfortable tingling began at his fingertips, spreading up his arms, a prickling sensation that made his skin crawl. He scratched absent-mindedly, but the itch only intensified. "Must be mosquitoes," he said, though he hadn't noticed any insects. The throbbing in his wounded arm became more intense, a sharp ache that demanded attention. Unable to ignore it any longer, Sloane unwrapped the bandage. What he saw made his heart lurch. The skin around his wound was discolored, a malted mix of gray and green. A viscous, silver-tinged fluid seeped from the wound, emitting a pungent odor reminiscent of stagnant water. Embedded within the flesh were small, shimmering scales. "What the hell?" Sloane said, panic rising in his chest. He picked at one of the scales, wincing as it detached from his skin with a sharp sting. Holding it up in the dim light, he saw that it was iridescent, reflecting hues of blue and green, just like a fish scale. A sudden snap of a twig jolted him from his shock. His head whipped around, eyes scanning the shadows. The forest had gone deathly silent. No bird songs, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive, suffocating quiet. Sloane's pulse quickened. Stuffing the scale into his pocket, he turned and hurried back to the cabin, his footsteps quick and unsteady. The branches seemed to reach out as he passed, scratching at his arms and snagging his clothes. Bursting into the clearing, he saw the cabin, illuminated by the faint glow of the porch light. Relief washed over him. He took the steps 2 at a time and flung open the door. Amon glanced up from his card game, eyebrow arched. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Something's wrong," Sloane said, his breath labored. "Look at this." He pulled the scale from his pocket, holding it out with trembling fingers. It was under my skin. Amon took the scale, turning it over in his hand. "So you found a big scale," he said flatly. "Big deal." "No, you don't understand," Sloane insisted. "They're growing out of me." He lifted his arm to Amon's face, revealing the patch of scales spreading across his forearm. Amon recoiled, a look of disgust crossing his face. "That's sick, man. You need to see a doctor." Before Sloane could reply, the cabin lights flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness before humming back to life. The temperature plummeted, their breaths forming white puffs in the air. "What the hell's going on?" Amon said, rubbing his arms for warmth. A low hum filled the room, a resonant vibration that seemed to emit from the very walls. Sloane's arms throbbed in response, the scales twitching. He doubled over in pain as a sharp sensation shot through his spine. "Amon, I don't feel so good, he said, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. Amon backed away, fear creeping into his eyes. Maybe you ate something bad? Sloane's vision blurred. The room swayed, and a wave of nausea rolled over him. He stumbled towards the bathroom, barely making it before vomiting into the sink. The bile was tinged with an unnaturally oily sheen. He gripped the edges of the porcelain basin, his fingernails, now darkening and hardening, scratching the surface. His reflection in the mirror caught his eye. His pupils were dilated, irises ringed with a faint green glow. His skin had taken on a pallid hue, veins visible beneath the surface. What's happening to me? He said, terror tightening in his chest. Behind him, the bathroom door creaked open. Amon stood hesitantly in the doorway. Sloane, maybe we should call for help. Sloane turned to face him, and Amon's eyes widened. Your eyes. A sharp pain shot through Sloane's legs, sending him collapsing onto the floor. His muscles spasmed uncontrollably. It hurts, he cried out, clutching his sides. Amon rushed forward, but stopped shortly, uncertainly freezing him in place. I don't know what to do. Sloane's limbs began to contort, bones shifting beneath the skin with audible cracks. His hands warped, fingers fusing together as webbing sprouted between them. His shoes split open as his feet elongated, toes melding. He screamed, a guttural, inhuman sound that resonated with the humming filling the room. Help me, Sloane begged, reaching out a malformed hand. Amon retreated, panic overriding his instincts to assist. I can't. Suddenly, the cabin windows shattered inward, a spray of glass raining down. A fierce wind whipped through the room, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. The lights flickered wildly before extinguishing completely. From the darkness beyond the broken windows came a series of wet, slithering sounds. Shapes darted just out of sight, shadows darker than the night, undulating and shifting. Amon pressed himself against the wall, eyes darting frantically. Who's there? An otherworldly voice echoed through the cabin, gurgling and deep. He's ours now. Sloane's transformation accelerated, scales spreading across his body, clothing tearing as his form changed. Gills opened along his neck, flaring with each labored breath. His mouth elongated, teeth sharpening into rows of tiny points. Please run, he managed to utter before his vocal cords altered, the words dissolving into a series of guttural clicks and hisses. Amon bolted for the door, but a massive shape blocked his path, a creature towering over him, its body a grotesque fusion of humanoid and aquatic features. Its eyes glowed with a luminescent intensity, fixed on Amon with predatory interest. He stumbled backwards, tripping over the overturned coffee table. Stay away, he said, scrambling to his feet. The creature advanced slowly, each step accompanied by the slick sound of suctioned feet peeling off the wooden floor. "You trespassed where you do not belong," it said. Behind the creature, more forms slithered into the cabin. Beings of the deep, their bodies adorned with bioluminescent patterns and appendages reminiscent of fins and tentacles. Sloane, now barely recognizable as human, rose to his feet. His eyes met Amon's. A flicker of recognition passed between them. "Sloane?" Amon said, a mixture of fear and disbelief. Sloane tilted his head, the movement unnatural. He extended a webbed arm towards Amon, not in aggression, but in a silent plea. That concludes today's episode. Join us again next week for another spine-tingling tale on Simple Dark Stories. If you enjoyed this and would like to help out, please give us 5 stars and tell us what haunts your dreams. Until next time.